So much for joining us this morning in the very first of a series of live fireside chats that will be happening as a build-up to the upcoming BioAfrica Convention. My name is Phemelo Motene. I'm going to be facilitating the fire chat conversation. This is in line with a conversation we're going to have on current IVD status and innovation for the future. Our partners in this particular conversation is SALDA as well as Africa Bio. I do want to welcome to the session to kick us off and also welcome everybody. I want Sabine Haler to be with us, the chairperson of SALDA, who is actually going to give us the welcome address, and then we will then kick off the fire chat conversation. I also want to welcome members of the media as well, and anybody else who is joining us virtually. Sabine?
Sabine Haler, and I'm the chairperson of SALDA. SALDA is the Southern African Laboratory Diagnostic Association. And I would also like to acknowledge our partners in this event today, Africa Bio. So Dr. Msomi and his colleagues and his team that have helped put together this event today. I'd like to start off by introducing my colleague and our executive officer, Sarah Cohen, to just let everyone know a little bit about who SALDA is and what we do. Sarah, can I hand over to you, please?
Good morning, everyone. So just to mention that we have a number of exciting speakers lined up today. I'm just sharing the slides and also sharing our agenda today, where we would be giving an overview of SALDA, as well as having 3 dynamic speakers, as well as a Q&A session. I hand back to Sabine just to give us profiles of all our speakers, and then I'll go into more detail around SALDA and what we stand for and the value of IVDs. Sabine, handing back to you.
So I'd just like to introduce, first of all, myself. So I've had 3 decades of experience in the multinational and local companies in the healthcare, life science, and IVD sectors. Of course, I'm passionate about the industry, and that's why I volunteered many years of time. I also have been on the board and exco of various associations within the industry, and I'm very positive about trying to make a positive contribution and adding value to our industry. In terms of Sarah is an independent consultant with 3 also decades of laboratory and clinical trial experience. She has worked with teams both locally and abroad in the lab and clinical trial environments, both in the public and private sectors. She is the current executive officer of the Southern African Laboratory Diagnostic Association and is keen to also make a difference in IVDs and healthcare. In terms of Dr. Dimakatso Matebe, she is new to SAPRA. She has a PhD in pharmacology from the University of Pretoria, an MBL and an SBL, and project management experience. Dr. Matebe has also worked in both the pharma and medical device industries, IVD as well as non-IVD, for over the past decade, and has a managerial position in QA and RA. Her current role since April of this year in SAPRA is the Senior Manager for Medical Device and Radiation Control. Then we have Mr. Daniel Ndima from Cape Bio. Daniel is a scientist who specializes in structural biology of infectious diseases. He's a protein engineer trained in protein crystallography, bioprocess engineering, as well as biomanufacturing. He's a founding CEO of Cape Biotechnologies, or also known as Cape Bio, which is a new South African applied genomics and biotech company that is a spin out from the CSIR and that develops molecular biology reagents, enzymes, and kits to empower African scientists, R&D institutions, and companies to innovate in the respective academic research and diagnostic areas. And then our final panel member is Dr. Giorgio Rossino. He is an excess of 30 years experience as well in the global healthcare and spans different areas in terms of a medical officer in the public health trenches of Asia and Africa, researcher and drug developer in the pharma industry, and an executive in global health initiatives, and now a social entrepreneur. He was the founding member and chief executive officer of the Global Alliance for TB Drug Development and for Foundation for Innovation and New Diagnostics, and served as chief operating officer of the African Society for Laboratory Medicine. He now serves as the chair of Next to People Foundation, an organization pioneering public-private partnership models for TB, HIV, COVID testing, as well as diagnostic and treatment. So I'm very pleased to have these panel members join us today. As Pumelo mentioned earlier, this is one of our first in the series of combined events with Africa Bio and SALDA. Now I'm going to hand over to Sarah to introduce you to SALDA.
Thanks very much, Sabine. So SALDA, or the Southern African Laboratory Diagnostics Association, is a body that represents laboratory medicine in Southern Africa. It's a single voice around IVDs and a collaboration of multinational and local companies who distribute IVD products. SALDA has a constitution and operates under Code of Ethics. We currently have a website as well as a LinkedIn social media platform. Just an overview of our EXCO, who represent multinational and local companies in the Southern African region. Our SALDA members also belong to multinational and local importers. So just to go a brief overview of the IVD process, we work very closely with manufacturers who then assist us with developing some of our IVD products, and then we supply these to laboratories. Laboratories work very closely with doctors to interpret results and make clinical decisions, and ultimately we are very involved in treatment, monitoring, and surveillance of patients in the broader environment. So the value of IVDs, effectively used IVDs help to reduce hospital stays, support patients to look after their own health, and release resources for use elsewhere in the healthcare sector, resulting in a healthier population and stronger economic growth. Through molecular diagnostic, the industry also contributes to the natural evolution of medicine and more personalized treatment. There's lots of research and development by our industry, which has led to creation of many new and innovative IVDs across a wide range of disease area. We also work closely in collaboration with the South African Medical Research Council, the DTIC, and the Department of Science and Technology. The focus areas in South Africa to date have been HIV and TB, malaria, COVID-19 in the last year or so has been very much in the forefront, as well as other non-communicable diseases. So these are just some of our key stakeholders that we engage with in the light of our work as an association. Just to mention some of them: SAMED, the Department of Health, the National Health Laboratory Services, SAHPRA from a regulatory perspective. We also work very closely with SAHCRA, our Clinical Research Association partner, as well as some of the business organizations in South Africa and the National Regulator for Compulsory Specifications. We've also had some interaction with FIND because they are very highly invested in diagnostic innovation as well. So some overview of our SALDA activities. We are an association member of the MedTech Industry Association, SAMED. We have an open channel of engagement with various authorities and other stakeholders. We've also engaged publicly around COVID testing communiques on radio and TV. We engage a lot with our local regulator. We've also had a working group working on clinical trial guidelines submitted to SAHPRA. We also work on market surveys of our industry For the COVID-19 pandemic, we were engaged in working on the procurement portal as well as the vaccine rollout plans and updates. We also give input now to the development of the implementation of the national health insurance, which is on the platform and the agenda for future discussions. Some of our future strategic plans are to work and engage with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, to also reach out to regional stakeholders on the continent, to look more at doing data analytics and also increase our collaborations with other organizations, institutions, and associations on the continent.
Thank you, Sarah, for that overview. We appreciate that. We're now going to cross over to our first panelist, Dr. Demakatso Matibe, and we look forward to hearing an update from SAPRA. Over to you, Doctor.
Okay, firstly, thank you very much to the colleagues, BioAfrica, for inviting us as SAPRA, and also for your time as well. So as indicated, I'm Demakatso Matibe from SAPRA. So what I'll give is an update. I received questions from the team, so it can assist with the focus, and this is what I'll be presenting today. Firstly, I would like to present the mission and the vision and the values of SAPRA. Where our vision is we are an agile and a responsive organization that is globally recognized, and then one of our mandate is to ensure access to safe, effective, and quality product in South Africa, and our mission is to promote access to health product and protect the human and the animal in South Africa through making science-based regulatory decisions. And our values are there. It's Ubuntu, responsiveness, integrity, transparency, efficiency, and excellence. I think everybody knows that SAPRA used to be part of the MCC under the National Department of Health, and then now we are a Section 3A entity and as a standalone SAPRA, but we're still reporting to the National Department of Health, our board. And our pillars, as I indicated, is safety, efficacy, and quality. And as an organization, especially on the medical device and radiation control, we are tasked with regulating and monitoring. By regulating, we're looking at monitoring, evaluating, investigating, inspecting, and registering of all health products, that including medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. And our mandate is governed by the Medicines and Related Act, and for the radiation control, as I indicated, part of the radiation control falls under our mandate. We're looking at the HES Act. Okay, so my focus today or for the presentation will be focusing on mainly the IVD, SALDA, as well as the medical device. So according to the Act, if you're looking through the Act, we can issue a license under Section 22C1 to manufacturers, distributor, and wholesalers. And for any business to operate in South Africa for selling or distributing or manufacturing or wholesaling of medical devices. By medical device, I just want to make sure that it includes IVD and non-IVD. If you look at the meaning of medical device, so that I don't keep on saying IVD and non-IVD. So medical device will include both IVDs and non-IVD. So prior to any organization, businesses doing their business selling or distributing or manufacturing medical devices or importing, they have to have a SAPRA license, and they can apply for the SAPRA license, for the license with us. And I will, the next slides will indicate how that is done. And one of the important is that the local company has to appoint and designate a designated authorized representative who resides in South Africa that will be responsible for the compliance. Once we have a license with in South Africa with SAPRA, this will be an oversight, especially on post-marketing. If there are any communication related to your establishment, and in future when we start doing product, this will be the point of contact for the between SAPRA and the organization. One of the points that I just wanted to raise now, especially on Section 21, there's been so many questions on Section 21, and especially on the preliminary questions I have received. We authorize and give a license to manufacture, distribute, and wholesale for establishment And then there's also part of listing of the product so that the organizations are able to sell the product and distribute them into the market in South Africa. So since we haven't started doing a full product registration within in our country, then we're using Section 21 so that the authorized applicant is able to sell, to distribute, wholesale, import the product. So this is the section in the Act that allows us to do that. So I just thought I'd bring this forward as part of the Section 22C for organization to apply for, and what is mandating us, what is leading us, if I can put it. So if I can start with the application process. As I indicated, any individual or company in South Africa may submit their application to SAPRA. And the application form, you can get them from our website. So if you go to the website SAPRA, I've highlighted health products. Once you have selected health product, there are different health products under this, there will be a drop down. It shows complementary, for example, and then there will be medical device. If you select medical device and you put your CASA on it, you'll see that the first one is application. And under that, you can select applications. Once you've selected that, then you can select what kind of activities you want to perform. You want to be a manufacturer, importer, exporter, or you want to distribute only, or you want to wholesale. Okay. And then I've just also put it, this is what you'll see when you press on the application form. You'll see the 3 different application form, and then you can download the form and complete the form as per different sections. And if you look at the guideline 16.03, it will indicate the requirements and what kind of documents you are required to complete the application process. Once you have completed your application form and then you are submitting the application form to us for review, the application form must have a cover letter, the quality related documents, and it will be guiding. The form will actually be guiding you. So if it's a higher class, for example, class C and D, there will be quality documents that you need to submit, your ISO certificate of the manufacturer, the declaration of conformity. So the form will direct you on what information must be part of the application. The organization or the individual's quality manual, the site master file, and the form must be signed. There's a declaration of the form. If the form is not signed, we cannot process it because you're not declaring that the information that is in there is correct, and we can go ahead. You are giving us the go ahead to review the form. So please, when you're doing that, don't forget to complete that part of the application. It's an Excel spreadsheet and it's got little folders at the bottom. So ensure that the declaration is signed before sending to us, and then PDF the form and then initial each page, and then send it to us with the proof of payment. Depending on what type of activity you're doing as an organization, you have a manufacturer, distributor, and a wholesaler, and these are the fees that you pay. If you go into our website, again, you will see SAPRA fees. I'm not too sure because this is blocking me. I have something that's blocking me. I don't know if you can see it, but it's SAPRA fees. If you press on that link, it will give you the information on how much money you pay and where do you pay and what is the reference number to use. Okay, so I've just given a further reference document to use that is on our website. If you want further information on, for example, processing of medical device establishment license, as well as the license to medical device IVD. So you can use this, and then you email the documents to mdcovid@SAPRA and mdadmin@SAPRA. So you can use both. Initially, we wanted to separate mdcovid, but we realized that most of the applicants were getting confused. So either of them will be fine. Whether it's COVID related or not COVID related, we'll receive them and review them accordingly. Okay. Once we have received the communication from the applicant, we'll send an acknowledgement letter from your side, and the document will be reviewed internally, processed by admin as well. And then the next level is our technical review. And then based on the kind of products that are listed and the type of activity, we will do a further internal review with our committees. Okay. If there's any queries on your application, whether at the admin stage or at the technical review stage, you will receive communication in the form of a query letter that indicates all the queries that we've identified. But if there's you have received acknowledgement letter anyway in the first place. But then during the process of review of your documents, if there's any queries, you'll receive a query letter. And this query letter definitely will be coming either from the person that was processing your application. And when you respond to the query letter, you please do a cover letter and then response to the query as indicated in the query letter. So I will advise, this is not prescriptive, but it makes it much easier for us to review internally. So let's say you had point A, B, C, D as your query. So when you respond, can you do the same so that it's easier to be able to, when we look at your response and the query, and then we can see whether it's being addressed sufficiently. And when you respond, can you keep, like, remember when you receive the query letter, it's coming directly now, it's not MD COVID, it's coming from an individual internal SAPRA email. You can still do the MD COVID, but because now you have a point of communication, can you use that person's email that you're communicating with directly? And you can copy me if you want to. My email is on the SAPRA website under key contact under medical device. Once your application went through all the processing stages and it's recommended for you to get the license, you'll receive a license notification letter. So I'll speak to the license notification later. I just wanted to speak to the application process followed for a COVID-related specific product-related process. Okay. So firstly, if you go into our website and you look at communication to the industry as well as under guidelines, there are various communications. So if you look at the MD013, it's just a reference. So if you want to do register or submit application, let me say submit, not register, please. Point of correction there. If you want to send in application for COVID-related test kit that are locally manufactured, the documents to follow is MD013. And if I can quickly go through the process, it's the same process as we did with your cover letter, with your Excel spreadsheet application indicating your activities, and then a signed one, and also extra documents that is required. But for the COVID-related products, if I can stop there a little bit, is that a decision was made last year to say all the product, remember our mandate is safety and efficacy and quality product. There was an increased number of COVID product that were coming into the country that we were not sure about the efficacy and their safety. So as a regulator, it's our mandate and our responsibility to ensure that all the product that goes into our market are safe. And it's one of our oversight, our responsibility. So one of the decision made was that we are going to choose one of our national reference lab, and currently NHLS is the one that's helping with that, to do performance evaluation on COVID-19 test kits. And this is where the difference between the normal other listing of the product and COVID-19 related products that are coming through into our organization for review. Once we receive the application with all the necessary document, please refer to MD013 to see it's exactly the same information, but with extra information, because this is a Class D and it's COVID related. The document will give you the details on exactly what you need to submit. Once it's being submitted, it goes through admin screening and then internal technical review. In case there are any queries, the same communication as previously stated will be followed. And once the team, the technical review and also the CEC committee, it's called the CEC committee, has reviewed and recommend to go for performance because all the information and documents are submitted, then you'll receive a letter as an organization for that the product, the COVID product is now can move on to NHLS for performance evaluation. Okay, and once that is done, the communication will be between the organization or the applicant with NHLS, and then with the submitting of the test kits, the protocols, and the discussion, and also the contract between the NHLS and as well as the applicant. All right. Once NHLS has done the validation, the performance evaluation, sorry, they forward the report to us. We review the report together with the CEC committee, and they have recommended, based on their response, we'll write a notification letter if based on the results to indicate the output, whether it's being accepted or it's being recommended, that particular COVID-19 test kit, or it's not being recommended. Okay. This MD001, it's a reference if you go into our website. It's for imported COVID-19 test kit. All right, the same process will be followed. And once we receive the application and it's a COVID-19 related product, we review, as I indicated, and then it's also going through our the NHLS. On this point, we have received so many questions to say, if it's CE mark, why is it going to NHLS? If it's being FDA approved, why is it going to NHLS? Remember, we also, as an organization and as well as a country, it's our responsibility and it's our oversight to ensure that all the products that come into our country are safe. So that is one of our reassurance process that we've put in place to ensure that is happening. And that what we have picked up is that not all the products that are indicated that they're being approved in US FDA has passed through some of the tests, especially specificity and with NHLS. So it's our responsibility to make sure that what's in our market is safe. And if you look at on the right side, that's the process flow, and the reference document is MD015. Okay, and this is the process flow for molecular testing kits. Okay, I'll not go through the same process, but the process flow from internally, it's exactly the same. So you can review MD014. And then the next one is for serological test kits. It's MD002. So this one is actually where I'm even putting in where we are putting the CEC committee that I've already mentioned. And then once that it meets all the requirement, it goes to the National Reference Lab, which is NHLS. So this process I've already explained. I don't think it's necessary for me to explain it further. Okay, so once, as I indicated, once we got the report from NHLS, if it's non-COVID related, we also reviewed internally, and then we want to issue the license to the applicant. The applicant will receive the notification letter, and this is an example of the notification letter that the applicant will receive, indicating that the license has been approved, and then there is a payment, that the final payment for us to issue the license. Initially, the license was collected, the original, but because of COVID, we are sending the license through to the applicant via an email, and that license will also have our CO signature. So these are the details. So you'll receive a letter that indicates how much you're supposed to pay, and also the details of the bank details. Okay. Again, another process, it's the amendment. This one it was not on one of the questions, but I thought I'd bring it through because we have received a lot of queries in relation to the amendment, if organization wants to make amendments. And it's the same process. You do a cover letter, you indicate where you want to make changes in your application, and then you send us an updated application with the areas that you have updated, exactly what you want to update. If you're changing an AR, you're adding a COVID. When you're adding a COVID, the COVID will go through the same process, or addition of your other product, non-COVID related product. So if it's clear, it becomes much easier for us to review instead of us going through the whole process. And then the cover letter will be required, as I indicated already. So these are the documents that you'll send to us when you're doing the amendment, and then the proof of payment. The payment for amendment is the 4,200 as indicated. And once we receive the application or to amend your license, we will share with you an acknowledgement letter to indicate that we have received it, and it's currently under review, and then the person that will be addressing, as I indicated, you have a technical reviewer that will be communicating with you, so their contact details will be in that red space, and you can further communicate with them. Okay, and then you get a notification letter once the amendment cannot be, once you've sent an amendment, you cannot implement it. You have to get a response from our side to indicate that it's being implemented, and then, it's being approved and it can be implemented. You'll receive a notification letter that indicates so with the fees, and then you'll receive an updated license accordingly, if it's not only a notification. I just wanted to highlight some of the important stuff. This is the non-compliance. If you read document MD012, it indicates the contravention to the Act. So you may not manufacture, distribute, that includes importing and exporting, and or wholesale a medical device, as I indicated, or IVD, medical devices, IVD and non-IVD, without a valid SAPRA license. You may not advertise Class C and Class D medical device to the public, especially COVID-19. That has to be done by healthcare professionals. This has been shared with the organization, and with the industry, if you look at MD012. So I just wanted to reiterate that part. Any challenges that we have been facing as an organization? We receive applications shared by different people at different times from the same organization. So that becomes very difficult, because and also responses that are coming. If we, let's say, for example, we have given an organization query letter that has 5 or 6, let's take 6 queries. When they respond to 2 this week from person X, and then it's quiet for about 3 to 4 weeks, or even 2 weeks. And then we get another response, and then another response. So we're trying to figure out how to manage that, but then it becomes difficult. That means we have to put it on hold, because we are not going to review only that 2 documents, because what kind of response are we supposed to share with you? If there are more queries to that, then we've got now 6 plus 1. If the 2 queries that you have responded are not satisfactorily addressed. So that means we'll have 2 plus the 4 that's outstanding, and then another 1 plus 4 that's outstanding, so it's not cohesive. So if we can have 1 response at the same time, and usually on the letter there is a timeline for responding. And I think maybe this is why I'm asking to please communicate with us to say, sometimes the manufacturers are not local, and it's going to take time before the applicant can receive it. Give us a reasonable time, not at 2 months or 3 months, obviously, because that means the manufacturer has been manufacturing this, they will have this document in their possession. But communicate with the contact person that have contacted you with the query to say, can I ask for an extension? And based on the reasonability of the time given, then the technical person or the person you communicated with will respond whether it's reasonable or not. Another challenge is that we're receiving applications that are incomplete. The site master file or the quality manual is not there. The declaration is not signed. So maybe if the applicant can look into that, because that can also, it prolongs the time of us reviewing the whole application, or for the application to be approved. I put it that way. Industry engagement. We have various formal and informal platforms to engage the industry. We have the ITG forum. The medical device one was part of the bigger group, but I know for a fact I attended the first meeting, just my 2 days of joining SAPRA, where different industry associations were on that meeting. So now there is a specific medical device focused forum that we have meetings every, because this was April, May, June, after every quarter we have meetings. And other engagement is the one that we have now, where we are being invited to various industry associations or any community that invite us as SAPRA to come and present. Other engagement will be from our side, where we initiated from our side, where we'll have workshops and then webinars, and then give updates to the industry and the community at large, all our stakeholders. Our website is our point of contact as well. And then also direct contact with emails and also planned meetings. If doesn't have to be a lot of those, especially planned meetings, but when we are available, especially from my side, we do our best to have those meetings with the applicant regarding specific application. And I just want to reiterate that the intention of the industry engagement is to inform not only industry as well as us, to see where we can improve or even enhance some of our processes, collaborate, consult with the industry, as well as involvement of industry. Right? We have various stakeholders that we engage with, general public, international organization, healthcare professional industry, including researchers, other regulators, for example, in Africa, as well as international regulators that we work with. Healthcare professionals related organization, academias, research institution, donors, partners, other government departments that we work with, the media, international organizations as well. And that will be all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dimakazo. There are a few things that are coming through on this chat, some questions. What I think would be key to do now is to perhaps go straight to Daniel, Mr. Daniel Ndima, who is a Chief Executive Officer of Cape Bio first, because some of the issues that are coming through on a Q&A are related, I suspect, to also his issues. So let's give him a chance, and then we can then get to a point where we can all engage with some of the issues. Mr. Ndima?
Thank you, Pamela, and thank you to Africa Bio and SALDA for hosting this event. And good morning to my fellow panelists and the rest of the scientific community that has joined the session. As Pamela said, my name is Dan Ndima. I'm the CEO of Cape Biotechnologies. Cape Bio was a project that was initiated at the CSIR, and its core mandate really, through the support of Department of Science Innovation, was to create, local capacity for reagents that are required in molecular space for research and diagnostic purposes. So when we started, we literally looked for molecules that we can sort of mine from the Cape Floral Kingdom, the biodiversity hotspots. We do bioprospecting. That side, we also use marine biodiversity to search for novel molecules. But I was asked to briefly speak about my personal journey as it relates to the journey of the company. I think in terms of, this is my profile. I don't have any other profile other than this. I studied biotechnology at the University of the Western Cape. And at honors level, I was working on industrial latex plant research. I think already then my academic journey was more about, how do I harness the skill set that I'm honing at university to ensure that I can venture into biotechnology. So it has been a journey, and I was fortunate to be an Allen Gray Fellow, and as a result, had mentors that were training me as an undergrad. So I had a couple of entrepreneurial activities back then as part of my training. I then moved to Pretoria with Prof. Data to study specifically structural biology of infectious diseases, just to look at modeling based on atomic interactions between pathogens and human receptors. So, and to disentangle those interactions, but also looking at how one can detect such diseases. So this is sort of my background training. I had an opportunity to pursue my PhD at Oxford University through a scholarship again, and I think I chose a path that I started with, which is to continue with the Cape Bio initiative at the CSIR. under our employment, I think it's over 50 staff members now that we have hired, and we are just about almost 3 years. We incorporated in 2018, but we have grown massively in the last few years. And more importantly, we are contributing to some of the empirical programs that are mandated by the government in terms of recruiting young scientists and ensuring that they have the skill set to be able to be part of the innovation cohort in our company. But to extend the journey, I'm going to speak more about our sustainability phase, where we have managed to sort of find a niche where we want to operate as a company, and we want to sort of grow this space, which is more of developing these key molecular biology enzymes. We developed a platform for making them. We now have a diagnostic platform. We're also into fourth industrial biotech platform, and this work was also supported by our government and other stakeholders in terms of how the country can position itself in as far as this field is concerned, looking at AI, machine learning, so that we can be able to come up with proof of concepts or molecules that can act as therapeutics, but also looking at diagnostics. As a company, really, as I mentioned, we leverage AI to develop these enzymes, whether we through rationalization or through a blank search and find and develop. So why we exist, as I mentioned, we know that Africa as a whole is a net importer of these molecular reagents or diagnostic reagents. I'm going to say biotechnology products, just to include everything under that scope. Even though the landscape is starting to change a bit now, associated with this were long turnaround times, high costs of this, a lot of trade deficits between ourselves and the rest of the world. And there were lack of African-based innovations. I think importantly so, we saw during the pandemic, during the peak of the pandemic, I think the first wave where there was a competition around reagents that are required. What we did then was to, look at what we have in our portfolio and see if we can respond in terms of providing PCR-related reagents for COVID-19 testing. And really what we're trying to solve, overarching need is creating this African manufacturing capacity. I would say African biomanufacturing capacity, since it's more biotech other than generic manufacturing. We want to have scalable technologies, and we are proving this, with time as we learn all the tricks and trades, and as we develop our own. But we need alternative and affordable technologies. We need to, make sure that whatever we do, it has a broader, coverage of the life science spectrum. So this is the journey that we are working on. And really, our portfolio is quite simple. We have PCR cloning, CRISPR-Cas9 Cas genome editing tools. Recently developed Cas1 all the way to Cas12. We have other enzymes in the pipeline as well. They are still under QC. We're still testing their application in both diagnostics and other application. And recently we got support from MRC, TI, and DSI to develop an RT. We have other RTs that were in a process for specifically for RNA-related detection. But let me also speak about our platform, our diagnostic platform. We currently call it Cape Tech IVD platform, where we use our robust tech polymerase as part of the component of testing. As you can see, being able to detect even, SARS-CoV-2, even at low concentrations, we're able to demonstrate that, using conventional and RT-PCR applications. So this is a platform that we now are expanding to target other diseases, DNA-based, RNA-based. So we are increasingly researching and ensuring that we can create a local capacity when it comes to diagnostics now and in future. Really, in terms of our traction as a company, as I say, the projects that is CSRR, and we span out with 3 licensed technologies. And immediately we went to the US. We had a couple of meetings with some of our designated partners, and then we signed some agreements, and we were assisted by, I think we were supported by Africa Bio, MRC, and the government as a whole, to be part of the delegate that went to the US. And this has really opened a lot of opportunities for us to be able to engage these partners that are helping us in terms of research and development, and also in terms of distributing our products in the US and in Canada. I think I will briefly share about that later on. But yeah, so we took clean exit from CSIR, meaning we had to get private equity partner, which was E-Squared Investment, which is a subsidiary of Allen Gray Limited. Being an Allen Gray fellow, that made it possible for us to have access to that particular funding. But we are really growing our pipeline. This is not the full picture, but we have that MRC ship coordinating assay where we're working with CSIR in order to complete the evaluation. I think we should finish that any time from now. But really, just speaking about the future of diagnostics and what we really want to achieve. For me, it's not really, personally, it's not really about just diagnostics. It's looking at how biotechnology can be a contributor to the national, GDP, job creation, skills development, capacity creation, etc. So for that to happen, really, we have to look at its holistic offering, looking at examples such as those in the US, where you see not only US, but a few other countries, really, you find that, the contribution to GDP as a result of biotechnology as a whole is really showing its benefit, even now during vaccine manufacturing. Sorry,
are you back, Daniel?
I'm not sure.
So perhaps, yes, we had lost you for a few minutes.
Which slide did you lose me?
The previous, you had just completed that slide. Yes, go ahead.
This one?
Yes.
Should I start here?
You were at the tail end of the slide.
Oh, all right. I think, yeah, I was coming to this slide just to say, reports are showing that really the more developed countries are benefiting during this pandemic as a result of the base that they have in as far as biotechnology innovation is concerned. And you can see the contribution to GDP per country. We are sitting at 44 as South Africa. I think, in terms of this score, it's mostly about consumption. I think the innovation rate is still low. We still have a low pace as a country. And when we look at the global index, IP index, you start to realize that the Asian countries are starting to be, more inclined to making some form of innovations that can be distributed around the world through, patenting and other related rights. So really, IVDs are part of this IP, as we've seen that South Korea, I think, has a few manufacturers that were distributing their products, across the globe. So we've seen this growing over and over, and we still lag behind as South Africa and the rest of the world. I'm going to skip this slide. But we've seen that biotechnology really, and this is the picture that I want to see at our JSC. We don't have core biotechnology index in our stock exchange. That means that at the baseline, we're sitting at maybe zero. We don't have any listed biotechnology company. If we don't have any listed company, in this regard, it means that our performance in as far as innovation and translation of that innovation is concerned is quite poor. So we need to improve that. And as I said, IVDs are part and parcel of this need that needs to happen. We're also seeing EFTs, electronic transfer funds, between companies. This is in the US, and we can see what was happening recently as a result of the development of vaccines, diagnostics, etc. There are a lot of money that was moving between companies to bolster some of the responses in these highly developed countries. Highlights just from this research, really, we are starting to see, Africa and ourselves, obviously in South Africa, starting to really do research that is more solution-based, other than doing research for the sake of doing research. I think this is something that we can applaud, the response rate that we have had as a country. It's too much writing. I'm not going to talk much about that. But yeah, this is us. We are based in Pretoria. We have a clean room facility that is ISO compliant. We basically are doing our research and development and manufacturing of all our platforms here. Our partners and channels, North America, India, and in Africa. So these are some of the people that we work with. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for that interesting overview on Cape Bio, and well done to you and your team. I'd like to now introduce Dr. Giorgio Roschino. We look forward to hearing from you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you very much. So my name is Giorgio Roschino, and first of all, let me thank really warmly Africa Bio and SALDA for the invitation to attend this very important webinar and share the floor with such important speakers like SAPRA and Cape Bio now. So the reason why I've been invited really is because I've been associated with Africa Bio and Dr. Somi for a very long period of time, and we've been thinking a lot about how gene experts have really made such a disruptive change in the TB world by being the first molecular diagnostics that have been developed and introduced and approved by WHO. And the whole thing was that how can we replicate what at that time, when I was the CEO of FIND, we have been able to achieve, and how can we repeat this somewhere in South Africa, for example? That was really one of the dream or the thing we have been thinking about. So, but before coming into the details, I would like to position a little bit the technologies within the context of public health and within the context of laboratory system. And so I make reference to one historic declaration, which was the Maputo Declaration, where all the African countries came up with the idea of developing national laboratory policy. Because when we develop new diagnostic tool, we have really to have very clear the idea, where is it going to be used, which level of the system, what the purpose of it is, and how does it fit within the real medical need, which at that time of the Maputo Declaration, which is very clear even now, would be the public health importance at that time with HIV, TB, and malaria, and we just would add COVID now and other potential pandemic events or viruses that could happen in the very next future. But the idea of having integrated laboratory system in the country is really a critical point to discuss even before discussing the technologies. So that was the first thing. And the second thing is that ideally laboratory that deal or technologies that deal with public health and particularly for lower level of their system should ideally be integrated. Integrated, which means that infrastructure should be integrated, linked referral services to the higher level, the training, retention, the human resources, logistics, quality assurance, and within the context of an integrated laboratory network. And this is really a very important point. So why is that so important, and how does the laboratory, the system in a country contribute to the final impact? So the input for a laboratory system obviously are the infrastructure, the equipment, the reagents and supplies, and these have to apply to all levels of their system. Then the software, which is the human resources, the training, the motivation, quality assurance system, and management system. The output is that one has to come up with very strong national reference laboratory, and the NHLS is really a very good example for the whole of Africa, really, and probably even beyond Africa. Then the referral system should be there. The district hospital level, district level must be strengthened, and then the peripheral health center. And that is what it is really the very important point where we need really new technologies today is when it comes to community healthcare workers and the ability to empower them and to put them in a condition to be able to diagnose diseases as early as they occur. The objective of all this system, the input and the output, is to access diagnostic services, to improve case management and decrease morbidity and mortality. Now, a little bit of the background history. I joined FIND in 2003 as a founding member and the first CEO. And I left FIND in 2012, so I cannot really speak very much on behalf of FIND now, but I can just recall a little bit of the history about what happened with the gene experts, because it's a very interesting story. What happened was in 2003, when we established FIND, we had our Chief Technology Officer, Mark Perkins, and his role has been for 1 year to go around and to scout technologies that would allow us to move from the microscopy, which was a 100-year-old technology by which we were diagnosing TB all over in the developed and in the developing world, and to move from a technology which was so inaccurate, because microscopy has a sensitivity of 65%, and to move it into more modern technologies like molecular diagnostic. This was a very disruptive move because it has never done before, and at that time we didn't have anything that molecular diagnostic test approved by WHO for poverty-related diseases, as it were. So Mark made a very good scouting work, and he came back with the idea that Gene Expert, at that time was not called Gene Expert, but was the Cepheid company, and it was already in 2004, and we started making contacts with them and tried to understand what was it. So basically, it is the concept of it is that is the combination of different disruptive technologies. At that time, were very disruptive. Microfluidic, which is now much more in use by different companies, and the real-time PCR into a full automated technology, a closed system that really was giving results in very short period of time and with very high sensitivity and specificity, which was what we were looking for. So at that time, Cepheid was a medium-sized biotechnology company. I'm talking about 2004, and they just won a tender for detection of anthrax in the postal service. You might remember the post 9/11 anthrax threat in the United States, and the packs in the postal office that had anthrax powder in it, etc. So they won that tender, the postal service. So they were mainly one indication only for their technology. I must say that at the beginning has been very difficult to convince them to invest money into the TB world, because they, first of all, they didn't know much about TB. And they were convinced that TB in the United States is not such a big problem, which probably is not in terms of high incidence, but it's still there. But you know, the rest of the world is where TB is so important. They didn't understand that. And then we started discussion about the co-investment to develop the technology for the TB indication. Finally, we have been able to convince them that beyond the United States, there are two different markets. One is the public sector that FIND will protect. The other one is the private sector in the developed world, in the United States and Europe, where they can charge much higher price than what they charge in the public sector in developing countries or in emerging economies. And then based on all that, we came to the point where we would share the investment cost for developing the technology, and we would leverage our investment against the affordable price cost per test, which is, and the price was going to be price related to volumes. We had inspection of their factory. We knew exactly what the cost per test was going to be, and it has been quite an interesting exercise. But at the end, the conclusion was that the price is related to volumes, which it is now. In fact, we started with the price of $18 per cartridge. We reached now $10. So things are doing exactly as we planned. So this is what it looks like for those that have never seen it. Those involved in laboratory, I'm sure they know it very well. So it's an automated high-tech molecular testing. It's one step, as you can see the cartridge there. Is that cartridge is this is the cartridge where you put the sputum. You put the sputum inside the machine. You wait 90 minutes, 90 to 120 at that time, but 90 minutes, and then you get your results. The interesting thing is that you don't need a very close biosafety cabinet, even though there are conditions for it to be utilized at different level of the health system. So, and this is now the positioning. So this is the tiered health system. This has been really the backbone of our thinking at that time at FIND on understanding where the technology are going to be positioned in the public health system. So the lower level you see there is that the microscopy level is a bit higher, in fact, than the community healthcare workers. So one can imagine the community healthcare workers go around and see presumptive cases or suspect cases, and then they have to refer it to the microscopy. At that time, it was only, and still today, microscopy is the major technological diagnostic test. And then the district level was where we used to have culture at that time. The regional labs had only culture at that time, and we had at that time already introduced liquid culture from BD Midget, which had already been approved by WHO, which had to be positioned by regional level lab. So, but then when we have now started with the gene expert, as you can see at sub-district level, that's a level where you could already start introducing a molecular diagnostic test like the gene expert that has a very high sensitivity and very high specificity. So for us, that was really the positioning of the technology, and that was the way that WHO had approved it. And so this is how it has been done. Once the technology has gone through a very accurate evaluation process, it went into demonstration studies in many countries in the world. One of the major countries that produced more data to submit to WHO has been South Africa through the NHLS and MSF. This was, in fact, in Cape Town in Kalicha. So what, at the end of it, why we were so excited and why Gene Expert is really a relatively disruptive technology is that, you know, it's a modular thing. It goes from the JX1 that you see on the left-hand side here is not yet developed, but we have the 4, the 16, and up to the 14, which means that you can do 4 tests at the time, 16 tests, up to 48 tests in the same time, which is really what we were looking for in terms of scalability of the technology. But not only that, what became really very interesting was that the panel became a really true technological platform in respect to the fact that today you can detect and diagnose up to 16 diseases within the same technological platform. And very recently, many of you must have seen that the COVID-19 test also has been approved by WHO. And because the technology was already there in many district hospitals, particularly in Africa, it became quite popular to do the PCR testing through the Gene Expert. So that was how it went through. Now, when we look at the consideration for implementation, because these are important for the next step, when we see what is that is missing and that why do we need something else? Because first of all, you know, you need a steady power supply, which is available in many countries. Many countries is not or is very irregular. You must have secure premises, a good lab, biosafety requirement, the same as sputum microscopy. storage space for bulky reagents. As you've seen, these cartridges are quite bulky and you need a lot of them depending on the situation where you are. There is a problem with waste management. What do you do with the cartridges? These are very hard plastic cartridges and you have to dispose them at the end. They are not degradable and potentially hazardous waste because they contain mycobacteria theoretically inside. And then you need the laboratory technologies that would operate the technology and supply chain for reagents, and then also the capacity to perform annual quality assurance. So the cost effectiveness was very good, which was done before approval WHO, and it showed that the finding, we did this in South Africa, in Uganda, in India. The only thing that was there is in low utilization environment where TB is not very high, but this is becoming a little bit irrelevant now in comparison to the consideration that the technology is a true platform and you can in fact screen many other diseases through the same instrument. So it was good. So when we look now at how it works, you have now a new technology, it's disruptive, you have done your evaluation, everything is all right. Then the procedure, normal procedure, which still is in place, is you submit this to WHO for endorsement. So you have to submit quite a lot of data, the evaluation, the demonstration study, cost effectiveness. And then there is a special committee that meets once a year, which is called the STAG committee. I'm talking about TB now, but in general, it applies for broader indication for new technologies. So you get WHO endorsement. Now it is endorsed by WHO. Now you have to demonstrate even further that you have to collect evidence that in fact this technology has been approved, you demonstrated that it's good. Now you have to scale it up. And now what you are thinking to scale up is on a global level. It's not in one country or two countries. So there is still a place for what we call collecting evidence for scale up, to introduce it in national program and roll it out in few countries to make sure that what you have accumulated initially, in fact, can be replicated when it is in national programs. And then after that, you go through the scale up. At that time was the Expand TB and Global Fund. And today, I think that GeneXpert is the first line of diagnosis of TB in most of the countries in the world. And this has been really one of the biggest ever achievement in poverty-related diseases, introduction of disruptive technology. In fact, molecular diagnostic at the time we introduced for TB, it was not even completely approved for viral load testing in HIV. So it was really very much parallel. But for TB, it really made such an incredible jump from microscopy to molecular diagnostics. So just now to recall you a little bit very, very quickly, even though it's not very important, but just to understand, what are the phases. You have the feasibility, the contract with the manufacturer, and the development phase. Then you evaluate the evidence for regulatory approval, as we have seen for SAPRA. And then you have a demonstration study, which is not only the evidence, not only the evaluation, which could be in vitro and in vivo, but now you have to demonstrate in actual patient cases in a comparative way, trials where you do when you introduce the technology. And that is really to change the policies, not only to get yourself a regulatory approval, but is to change the policy of how that technology can be used in the public health sector. Then you have the access phase, which is now countries have to buy it or have to introduce it. And that's where you have the evidence for scale up. And then you have the global impact when you are now have the evidence to measuring the impact on a global scale on the TB or whatever else it is. So what were identified already at that time, the future R&D needs for the GeneXpert was, the first important thing was assess the feasibility of decentralizing further. You remember that we were a sub-district level. There has been some attempt to look at positioning even the GeneXpert one level lower, which is the microscopy center in South Africa, has been done in very many instances. But then it is not appropriate to do that in the hands of the community healthcare workers, which is the very first front line for accessing or having the capacity to have early diagnosis of the disease. So in that respect, the decentralization happened from sub-district to microscopy center and not in a very standardized way. Then there has been, at that time was important to evaluate extrapulmonary pediatric TB. This is done, and one has really to say that FIND has been continued to do an unbelievable job together with the company also. And the positioning in the algorithm, has been done. Now it is very much approved by WHO. Is a first-line diagnostic test to diagnose TB. And then a second generation of for multiple drug-resistant TB, it has been done, and it is in fact very much implemented. But there was something that we still need to do, is to develop a technology which could be the same with the same company or another company. There is an Indian company that is very similar technology to Cepheid, very, very much similar, but something that could be very similar to a lateral flow technology or a very peripheral molecular diagnostic test that could be used by community healthcare workers, because that's where we can really address the issue of the missing TB cases. And this is true not only for TB, but could be the same for COVID and for any other public health disease that are affecting Africa in this moment. So this is where we still stand at this moment. But what I would like to say in this, and this is not, it is my personal opinion, of course, and is not complete in the sense of having everything mentioned here, but the COVID-19, it has shown us one very important thing, is that the only technology we have is PCR to diagnose, early diagnosing cases, infection cases of COVID-19. And this is very costly. We have seen it is dramatically costly. It's very laborious. It is a centralized laboratory exercise. It requires equipment, maintenance, requires people, etc. And then it also requires a very strong laboratory network everywhere. But what is missing, so just one could imagine that if we had some rapid diagnostic tests that could be utilized to identify earlier COVID-19 case at community level, where community healthcare workers could go around, do active case finding, like we are doing in TB in some, with next to people in or Tambo district with active case finding. They could do active case finding for COVID-19 with the rapid test and identify earlier and limit then the spread of the disease. So, I mean, that part of technologies that could be utilized by community healthcare workers is still a very important public health need that need to be addressed by organizations, African development companies like Cape Bio, Research Institute, and everything else. And on the other hand, current molecular tests we have, you know, both the GeneXpert and also the Indian company, they are not fit to be used at community level because they require still some trained personnel to manage it, some infrastructure, some instruments that require maintenance, and that is what is the limiting factor. Lateral flow test, you know, these are the tests that have been used for malaria, for HIV, for the pregnancy test, which is single drop, and then the very quick results. These are appropriate for positioning at that level. Community healthcare workers can manage very easy lateral flow technology. They still need, because they are not still perfect, nor for COVID-19, nor for TB, and for many other things. They still need a lot of work and a lot of improvement and scientific development in terms of reagents and potentially in readers that would increase the sensitivity of those tests, and these readers to be a platform so that one reader could fit for all those lateral flow technologies that one does. And I think that, you know, there are two major areas. One is molecular diagnostic tests need to be improved. They need to be brought to the lower level, real lower level of that system. And the other thing, there is still something that we could do out of lateral flow technologies with antigen antibody tests, which are simple to use and should be also affordable platforms with readers that can face current and future epidemic. And so I'm throwing one very unrelated example, you know, and I'm not pushing for anything, but just I'm looking at some of the new new potential technology based on lateral flow technology that have in association with the new technologies or patented, these are patented technology, and you know, but it could be useful to understand and to look at this in a very critical way. So as you can see, you know, the development of fluorescence nanoparticle, there has been a lot of work at CSIR on nanoparticles, and now quantum dot technologies that could be used for the same purpose. Then what we need is single-use instrument with the optical capacity. So this is what I was just saying now, and the combination of different potential technologies with cassette, which are plastic cassette with cellulose on one hand. It could be, this is the second generation of those cassette, as it were, like the reagents are the second reagents, the second generation, third generation of reagents, but the combination of this together with the new cassette design and understanding about optical complication in that, and then looking at readers that are innovative, integrated with digital platforms that would increase dramatically not only the information storage, but also the sensitivity about the reading. So this could be the new frontier, but together with molecular diagnostic and something else. I put this just as an example of how the combination of different technology, just like what happened with GeneXpert, can happen again, and then could really lead organization in Africa to develop new technologies for poverty-related disease. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rosinho. So this is the point where we allow then some questions and answers, and maybe it may start with you, Sarah. Having listened to what Dr. Rosinho was saying, what then will it take for South Africa in particular to integrate, this is what I'm hearing, to integrate all these technologies, possibly integrate technologies that exist, and also have the kind of movement that's required by innovators, by entrepreneurs like Daniel, and regulators move in a swift way to get us to a point where we can have a policy that allows entrepreneurship, a policy that allows for innovation to happen in the country that is very, very slow. Daniel pointed to the fact that, yes, we are more consumers now than we are innovators. There must be stumbling blocks. He's also made very important points about the fact that, you know, he happened to be an Alan Gray Fellow, and that was his journey. But one has to wonder, what if he wasn't an Alan Gray Fellow? So what possibilities lie for South African entrepreneurs and innovators for us to get to a point where we are players as well in the global arena and are part of the solution in some of the problems that we have in the healthcare life cycle. So Sarah, I mean, this is a question to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Pamelo. I think from a SALDA perspective, I think we've been keeping a very strict eye on what is going on out there with our key stakeholders in the country, and there have been applications for grants to enable entrepreneurs to innovate, both from the South African Medical Research Council. The DTI has also engaged with us a lot under the Invest SA portfolio, looking at entrepreneurs who'd be interested in innovation. So I think the opportunities are growing in the industry for innovation and development of new technologies. And thanks both to Daniel and Dr. Rosinho for highlighting the fact that we need to engage more as an industry and look at the potential for all these new technologies out there. I know PCR has been groundbreaking technology that we've been using, and we need to look forward to move away from that. It is very costly, needs a lot of expertise, and we're also looking at alternatives to engage in the sort of field that we're working on. So it is a growing endeavor. Pamela. We don't have all the answers as an association, but I think we need to engage with key stakeholders, with government, with SAPRA, with the Medical Research Council to see how we can move this forward and allow for all the entrepreneurs to have an opportunity in the industry to develop innovation. I'd also like to hand back to our chair, Sabine, if she's got any additional comments.
Hello, Sarah and participants. I would absolutely agree with what you've shared with everybody. I would also be keen to hear about the participants on the call. What do they feel? Pamela, would you facilitate that?
So one of the things that I think are paramount now, and I'm going to go straight to a question that's come through, and this is for you, Dr. Dimakazo Matibe, is, how long does the SAPRA license amendment take? And this particular person there is, I think it's Olani Mhlongo, who says, I think it's of paramount importance that SAPRA indicates how long the registration process takes for an organization to align with the set timelines. I think it's important because as people innovate, there are other pressures as well, financial pressures, their life cycle in the business, especially as entrepreneurs, absolutely depends on what kind of timelines they can actually include in their business plans. So perhaps it's a question you can ask Dr. Matibe.
Thank you very much, Camilla, and the candidate that asked the question. The timelines for SAPRA, if I can start with the amendment part, there are various factors that are dependent on that, right? So it cannot be a straight answer. When you're sending the SAPRA as an organization an amendment, if everything, let's start with the first scenario, that you're amending and you have sent us the cover letter that is clear on the change that your amendment that you're making in your documents, you've signed all the documents, you have also included in your application the proof of payment, that means it's not going to come back to you if all the information is clear. So that is a process, because when it comes in, it gets reviewed to check if all the documents are coming available and they are indicated as indicated in your amendment, and then we review it. So that can take between 10 and 15 working days. That's the first scenario. All the documents you've given to us are correct and are aligned to your amendment. The other part is that's what I'm saying, there are a lot of factors. The first factor is it depends on when we get a query on the amendment, how long it takes the applicant to respond. Because when I give it back to you, that means my clock stops. And then I give you an opportunity as an applicant to respond, and then it comes back. So what we have realized is that most of the applicant, they count the day they send it to us the first time, they minus the query letters, and then it becomes 40 days. And that's where the issue is. That's why I'm answering it in that kind of way. But if I summarize it, it has to be 10 to 15 working days if everything is okay. Thank you very much, Camilla.
Don't go anywhere, because there is another question that's related to you. And this one is maybe just a statement, and it's from Michael. I don't see the surname, but Michael is saying, well, comparing SAPRA's process to that in other countries is lack of flexibility in developing molecular testing kits to blame for the poor availability of testing in South Africa. And he says, in the UK, for instance, accredited laboratories are able to develop their own assays, ensuring that they can provide a service even if the availability of testing kits is limited. Dimakazo?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I think it's Michael. At the beginning of last year, when the organization, SAPRA as an organization, took a decision to do performance evaluation, as I indicated, for safety, to ensure safety. NHLS sent the ethics approval, and it's the only lab that came back that had that. Some other labs didn't. And to ensure that there's no biasness as well, we selected as an organization NHLS. And that's the reason why we are using NHLS, because they have ethics approval and they have developed protocols that are consistent that across all the applications that are coming through to us.
Dr.
I hope
Rosinha,
I've answered. Sorry?
yes, we'll see if Michael
listening.
comes back. We'll
Let
see
me
if Michael
mute
comes
because
back.
I'm getting, sorry, Pamela, I'm getting feedback from you, so I'll mute and then I'll come back. I'll unmute when I have to respond.
Sure. We'll see if Michael is satisfied. Michael can maybe send another question. But to you, Dr. Rosinha, you spoke a lot in the beginning about policy, and you spoke a lot about an agenda, a holistic agenda that had to be the kind of environment that's required to get innovation going, to bolster innovation. And I don't know to what extent you have assessed what needs to be done in South Africa, but perhaps your take from where you sit, what kind of work needs to be done to find the kind of healthy environment that will allow a Daniel to thrive, for instance?
Thank you very much. I mean, this really was what I was trying to come as a comment. And I think, you know, and this very much also to Daniel, but also with the other entrepreneur that attended BioAfrica last year and presented some of their newest technologies, diagnostic technology, and they are seeking advice on how do we move our technology forward. What is the secret? Not the secret, there is no hidden secret, obviously, but what is the mechanism that one can put in place? And I think that BioAfrica has a real major role to play together with SAPRA and together with SALDA. I mean, these are really very powerful organizations, and I think that the process should be standardized somehow. Maybe this could be one of the sessions at the next BioAfrica Congress, which is happening in August. And that is really first to understand what is the unmet medical need, what that is that we are trying to achieve here. And if we decide that what we want to do is to develop technologies that address a very important gap, which is what do we put, how do we empower community healthcare workers to be more active in detecting early cases and detecting missing cases of the most important poverty-related disease in South Africa, which is TB, HIV, malaria, still even malaria for the broader context in the African continent, but also COVID-19. So first of all, to identify the indication, the potential, where is it, what is the unmet medical need, and then go and through a joint process where all this organization and the industry and the researchers, we come with an ideal product profile. What is that we have in mind? What is that we want for that particular indication? Is it something, is an instrument-based technology or is a non-instrument-based technology? What sample do we want to test? Is it sputum? Is it blood? Is it something else? We could hopefully go outside of the sputum thing, which is difficult to collect in children, in HIV-positive individuals. I'm talking about TB now, but in general. And then based on that, we talk about what technologies could be done there. And then together with the government and Department of Science and Technology, launch a public call for all the companies in Africa and in South Africa to come up with ideas on how do we work. And then we have to collect some money, obviously, to help these companies to develop the technology. And that's how I see that could be happening very well. Now, to the point that was just mentioned about homemade laboratories that develop their own technologies and their own reagents, you know, it can be used for local use, but in the context of public health or utilization at national level or even at international level is much more difficult, because whatever technology you develop in your lab, it needs to go through evaluation, demonstration, it has to go through the whole regulatory process. Maybe it's doing very well in your context, you're doing well and it is useful, but in order to be used at national level and approved by SAPRA, it has to go through the process. Now, this was just a side comment that I wanted to make. Thank you.
No, I understand that, but I think what you're making us realize is that more than ever now is a time to collaborate. It's not a one-sided, one-sided kind of approach. There has to be a global approach to how this idea or strategy is taken forward. And maybe this is where I can ask you, Sarah, everybody, I think, is on the same page, but then somebody has to be the pioneer, and somebody has to make sure that that drive does happen. Where are the stumbling blocks? And by no means am I saying that people are not collaborating, but it certainly doesn't sound like it's at the level that is required to kind of get the movement that Dr. Rosinha is talking about.
Thanks very much, Pamela, for the question. I think there are various stumbling blocks that we have found. I think the pandemic in the last year or so has made it really difficult with influx of products. Sometimes they are not quality products. Sometimes they're counterfeit. We have those challenges. We have to work side by side with SAPRA. Sometimes we need to look for our products to be authorized for emergency use, but we also need to be careful that what we are rolling out is not made of certain quality, certain specifications that we need to adhere to. I do agree that we need innovation. We need the entrepreneurs. I think we need to all collaborate, not only from government, SAPRA, the association, both IVD and MedTech industry associations need to get together. So I agree with you, we do need collaboration, but that goes to mention that there have been stumbling blocks. And I think we need to look forward as well at the lessons learned from COVID and use those as steps to move forward and see how we can improve our processes, how we can make way for all these new innovative products as well.
Dr. Rosinha, go ahead.
I think you're on
You're
mute.
muted. You're muted, Dr. Rosinha.
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself. Sorry. I just was saying that this is a very important point because, just as it happened in countries, when we look at what has been the success in Korea, in Japan, and even in India, it's happening now in China. And this always starts with one point. We need to build up competency in the country. We need to have more competent scientists that are more familiar with the new technologies somehow. And this comes to the point of transfer of technology. So we have to to be in a condition, BioAfrica, SAPRA, everyone else, to attract companies that are detecting even proprietary technology to come and invest in South Africa and manufacture locally. Because by manufacturing locally, they will use our scientists to manufacture, and we will build that capacity in terms of science that is so critical then to have a spin-off. Now, we have heard from Daniel, he has spin-off from CSIR, but there could be spin-off even from international companies if we are capable to create an environment that is conducive for them to come and invest. Just yesterday, I think the president have announced the mRNA hub platform. I mean, this is all based on technology transfer. The same thing is for vaccine, is for drugs. It has to happen for diagnostic also. So we have to be in the condition of being so attractive for international companies to come and invest and manufacture locally. In some countries, they don't allow, for example, in Korea and Japan, they don't allow you to be on the market if you don't manufacture locally. I don't say that we should come to that point because we would be at the end that we don't have the technology we need, but we must create the condition to make that possible so that that knowledge and that technology is also transferred together with the technology. Now we have the new agreement that is happening where voluntary licensing is happening. You can see that Johnson & Johnson is making an agreement with Aspen Pharmacare to packaging. It's all right. I mean, it's in the value chain. You have to start somewhere. Even if we start packaging some of the instruments, some of the reagents, we become knowledgeable about it. We develop in country, in continent competency about what they are about and how we can do them by ourselves in the future. So I think it's a long process, but it has to start somewhere. And one of the parts is really to attract international companies to come and invest and manufacture locally. I think this is very important. And then for the Cape Bio, like Daniel, etc., is really to develop partnership and to be, but all this starts with the government understanding that, okay, we have now decided as a group of experts or whoever they are, that this is where we need investment from the government in terms of new diagnostic is here. And that's where we are going to invest for local companies to start manufacturing, while we also do all the rest in terms of international companies. Thank you.
So then, Daniel, let me ask you, we have to look to you to answer the question, is their environment conducive for someone like yourself? You've interacted with counterparts in other parts of the world. Are you able to confidently say, no, this environment will allow us to thrive and grow and partner together? Dr. Rosinho spoke about things, simple things like energy, availability of reliable energy. How do these elements impact on your growth and on innovation in the country? Daniel?
Thanks, Pamela. Maybe to touch one point before I answer your question. We tend to have a judge mentality. I think it's more of, I'm carrying a hammer, and if you mess up, I will hammer your brains out, basically. There is no spirit of collaborative to address the challenges. There are many entrepreneurs. I'm part of a consortium of biotech entrepreneurs across the country and some in the African continent. We all face the same issues, but I think South Africa is getting better. But I just want to say this. During the first peak of the pandemic, if you look at what FDA did with the manufacturers, they didn't say, bring your assay, I'm going to evaluate and give you the answer. They said, let's work together because we have a problem, a common problem. Let's capacitate and give you an opportunity where you need to improve, you will improve. So we're not supposed to be so separate that you are a judge and someone is something. We have to collaborate. And I like the fact that SAPRA has engaged with NHLS in terms of providing the services for reference. That creates enough capacity already for us to assess the local solutions. But you also look at the model in Europe where all the labs that are accredited can provide CE mark. I think if we allow ourselves to be flexible enough, I think more technologies will be evaluated because there's also an issue with background testing. So I think in terms of the environment being conducive for bio entrepreneurs specifically, I think we're getting there. I think the pandemic gave us the opportunity to look more holistically as to how we can collaborate to provide solutions. So there's a lot of groundwork research that is happening around the country, but it doesn't really get elevated to to be in a position where it can be commercialized and be absorbed by the government or the market itself. A lot of people develop technologies there and somewhere in shell. So to answer your question, I can't say the environment is either conducive or not conducive because even myself, whether I'm Allen Greenfield or not, the challenges I face are enormous. And if I was someone who was going to give up very easily, I could have. But I told myself that we have to make this environment conducive as bio-entrepreneurs. No one's going to do it for us. Therefore, we have to engage with the stakeholders. We have to raise our views and say, please listen to us. We are coming up with solutions for the country. We want to work together so that we can address these challenges. So it is not us we're not in a position to say, this is what we want. We don't want that. We want to be regulated so that we can be compliant all the time. But it's not only the matter of compliance, it's also about market share. A lot of consumables that are in the country are all imports. To break into that supply chain, you have to move mountains and mountains. It's so simple to switch from one equipment to another, right? It's so simple. It's just a matter of optimizing your protocol, change the protocol, and seeing if the system works. But you will have end users say, no, I don't want to change the system I've been using for the last 20 years. I mean, when are you changing? So there's also that challenge as well. So in terms of the environment overall, there are those challenges that we are facing as bio-entrepreneurs. But I think we're getting somewhere when you have the likes of Africa Bio, SAPRA, SALDA, working together with MRC and other stakeholders. This is what we saw. And this was very encouraging for us when we saw them coming together and calling us to some of the chats so that we can find a common ground. But there's still a lot of gaps. It's not about regulations. It's also about the market. It's also about perception with regards to local solutions that are developed. And to surprise you, we as a company, our products are mostly sold in North America than they are in the country. In fact, I can't even count. Yet these solutions, we have them, we make them local, and yet they are not even taken up. So you have, like I mentioned earlier on, that we have a Cape Tech IVD platform that we sell to Canada, to India, to US. They make assays and they sell them locally, right? What is it that we can learn from those processes so that we can have a process where local IVDs or local solutions can be easily uptaken by the industry? I think the question is that.
And maybe that's related to your question and your point, Daniel, is a question coming from Jean-Pierre, who says, so if we've got an issue with backlog, for instance, why are we not allowing accredited private labs to assist in NHLS and the likes of yourselves, SAPRA, Dr. Dimakazo?
Thank you very much, Camilo. I think I've answered this question already. The labs were given an opportunity to have their ethics approved, a specific process that they didn't go ahead. And most of the labs, based on the information I have, they didn't want to do it. So NHLS is the lab that did it. And based on that, that's the lab that we selected because they were approved with that ethical approval. And again, I think we have to be careful that we are also trying to avoid, that's why we're using a national reference lab, to avoid and to minimize biasness. Because even if the lab, an external lab is used, we still have to review the protocol, whether the protocol has reviewed. We have done that at the beginning of last year. The SAPRA did that with other labs. And when we reviewed the protocol and the report that was used, there were some areas that were not followed in the protocol, but then the product passed. So a decision had to be made. And that's where that's the decision that was made by SAPRA, that other labs were allowed to be used at the beginning of the pandemic so that there's no backlog. And the response that we receive is that some of the protocols were not followed. The process, the method as well, some of them were left behind. So a decision has to be made. And as I'm indicated, what's the mandate of SAPRA as a regulator is to ensure safety. And this is echoing back to what Sarah had said. When the pandemic came in, there were lots of test kits which were coming into the country. And where do we stand as a regulator? We took a decision to say, we have to do at least this process to ensure that the safety of the product that is used by our fellow South African, if I can put it there, it's at least being checked. So that's the decision that was taken. Thank you very much.
You spoke a bit about, Daniel, a couple of things that were your personal lived experience as an entrepreneur, and one of which was markets, and being able to raise money in a manner that all markets are able to raise money, that we haven't created that environment. And maybe by way of your personal experience and an example, and I'm not saying point fingers, but maybe to extend, why is it that you have accessed other markets and you're failing to break barriers here?
Thanks, Pamela. It's I can add a third layer. Access to investment is also a challenge. So there is no investor that can invest in your company if you don't have access to markets or if you don't have offtake agreements, especially in the beginning of your journey. And what really helped us to access other markets, because other markets don't have perception. If you have the best product, you simply have the best product. We provide data to them. For instance, one of the key technology, which is our tech polymerase, which we benchmark against those that are highly regarded in the industry. It performs best, and we gave it to the very same people to test and prove that. And when they saw that it was the best performing product, they said they want to switch. For them, it's about getting the best product possible and cheaper. So if they can be able to get that, I think that's how they are able to switch. But in South Africa, because of the industry still developing, there's a perception that if you develop something locally versus if you develop it in the US, they would rather take the one from the US than the one that comes from South Africa. What do we say about our local capacity and scientific skills then? It means that we are irrelevant then if we can't uptake what we develop as scientists. It means that the perception is also that the scientists that are developing these things are not the same as those that are in America, which is not true. So for us to access this market, we really had to present ourselves. And it was so easy to organize meetings and present your products, simple. Here, we're not even given opportunity to even prove that we have a product that can be applied to solve certain solutions. Just to open the door so that we can do presentation to key stakeholders. Problem, they are nowhere to be found, and excuses are excuses. But we're starting to see some change, as we become desperate as a country. We're starting to see more people engaging us and wanting to partner us in terms of us giving them some of these tools. So I think it's perception, that is wrong, because it also nullifies our abilities as scientists, because these are products that are developed by local scientists at PhD level, and some of them come from CSIR. What are we saying about CSIR then? So if we can eliminate that perception and understand and evaluate the local solutions and pass them based on merits other than favors, I think most of us in the industry, we're not looking for favors, we're looking for a fair opportunity for us to compete with these multinationals that are dominating the local market. We're not asking for favors, simply an opportunity to demonstrate that we have solutions that can solve our problems.
Dr. Rosinho spoke a little bit about talent. And I dare say we don't actually lack talent. What we have a problem with is retaining the talent. You do have young, ambitious, talented scientists who choose to, perhaps, unlike Daniel, take the scholarship and stay in markets that are thriving, in markets that are going to welcome them, in markets that are going to be allowing them to innovate. So maybe the bigger question here is, maybe both to you, Sarah and Sabine, how do we then retain the talent and the kind of enthusiasm that perhaps a young scientist has at the very beginning? And I have to also mention that I think Daniel is a special case, because I think many along the way give up and just kind of fizzle into the big corporates where it's a bit more comfortable. So we have to ask the difficult question: how do you then retain the talent that we talk about a lot, which actually does exist, but how do we encourage it to thrive, and how do we retain it? Either one of you, Sabine or Sarah.
I would suggest that one makes it very attractive for them to stay on the continent. I think specifically with the localization initiatives in terms of building local capacity, not only in South Africa, but the rest of Africa, I think those could be drivers that would appeal to an entrepreneur spirit to making a difference on the continent. Remember, the big objective is to make Africa more autonomous in terms of relying on our own manufacturing capability and relying less on imports. So if an entrepreneur like a Daniel could see that they could be making an impact, not only for themselves, but for the continent as a whole, for me, that would be a driver. I'll hand over to Sarah.
Thanks, Sabine. I am in agreement with that, but I'd also like to mention we need to go even beyond that and go to our students in our universities and engage them on the future and how they can grow their future locally and on the continent rather than going abroad. And I think one of our sister associations is doing that. Coming up will be a SACRA Career Day, where people from the industry, from pharmaceutical, from people involved in clinical trials will be engaging with university students to look at opportunities in the science field, in the clinical trial field, in the innovation field, how to retain this knowledge and this talent within our country. So I think we need to start a lot earlier, before even the students are qualified, to look at these opportunities of innovation and how we enhance the opportunities for our students already in the learning environment before they even qualify, and see where we can place them, how we can use and develop their skills.
Maybe Dr. Rosinho, this is the parting shot. We've spoken about a lot of things, but money is a big challenge. Daniel has alluded to this. And everybody now knows that where the money resides is also demanded by other people. So, you know, you cannot demand it because you're South African. There are many other competitors out there. And we've spoken about challenges in our environment. So we're not really looking attractive, and scalability being another issue. By way of your own experience, what kind of advice would you give to innovators like a Daniel? How are we going to attract the investors? You've spoken about the environment being conducive, but funding, how are we going to make ourselves more attractive with what we can change? Because there are a lot of other things we can't change. I mean, culture and those things we cannot change. But what can you say to us when looking for that funding and starting something that perhaps can assist us in accessing those funds?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just, before answering that question, allow me just to say something concerning the point of Daniel before, and something really addressed to SAPRA somehow. And is the point about, I understand that, and I've heard this thing many times, that not only in diagnostic, but also in drugs, generic manufacturer in South Africa, they cannot compete in the public tender because at the end of the exercise, they always fail in terms of pricing with Chinese or Indian competitors. And at the end, the government decides to go with the cheaper option without considering the local manufacturing as an added value to that product that could be because of employment and other benefit that brings the local manufacturing in the country. So what I'm asking SAPRA and probably even the African CDC today, it could be an idea that we can all put up as an important issue now that we are all talking about local manufacturing and vaccines, COVID-19 and all that, which is really bringing a lot of attention of local manufacturing to Africa. Really, it's really becoming a big issue in this moment. But really also to have recommendation, just similar to that of WHO, whereby SAPRA says for this level of that system, for this indication, this is a recommended technology. And that recommended technology then has to be somehow mirrored also when the tender is issued by the public sector, because the big tender, as much as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, the big tender for diagnostic is not very much for drugs, where the private sector is much bigger. But I would assume that the public sector for diagnostics and for technologies, for diagnostic technology is very big in the public sector. So to have some sort of local regulatory together with the African CDC, and as we all know, just recently, they have launched the new AMA, which is the new agency for African Medicament Agency, and Michel Sidibe is the special envoy for this thing. So when we talk about this regulatory, we talk about how to encourage local manufacturing in Africa. We need to have also a consequent sort of recommendation that has to come from internal regulatory bodies like SAPRA, which certainly in Africa is one of the heaviest one, together probably with Nigeria, maybe Ethiopia a bit less, but still these are the big countries. And then to have an issue together with the African CDC about official recommendation to countries about local manufacturing, local preference for local manufactured products that goes between medicine, vaccines, and also diagnostics. So I think that is a very important part. As to the financing, you know, it has never been as good as it is now. And the time is now, second giallo, really, the time is now, because anyone that has a good idea now and has the capacity to manufacture in Africa, this is the time to go and knock at the door. There is plenty of money. The African Development Bank is putting billions of dollars in order to accompany the plan of the African CDC to have this vaccine manufacturing in Africa in 5 sites. And if we are capable of promoting the agenda, not only vaccine that are very important, we all agree this is the first most important thing, but together we did diagnostics and even drugs. So all that should come now as a very potent call from local regulatory, from local government to the African CDC, the African Development Bank, and the European Union is putting money. Everyone wants to have a stake now to put money to accompany the development of local manufacturing in Africa. It has never been as good as it is now, but the time is now. We can't wait 1 year to start doing that. So it is important now to start creating this movement and to make that this has the visibility that this deserves and the push that we need to do, keeping in mind that the real two actors here are the regulatory in the country, the African CDC in Addis Ababa, and the African Development Bank to start with, to make sure that there is enough money for all this to happen.
Well, that's an excellent point to leave it at. I dare say, I think that's a really wonderful point to leave it at. I'll give over then now to Sabine Haler, who is going to give us our closing remarks.
So on behalf of Africa Bio and SALDA, I would like to extend my appreciation to all the panelists today, of course to our participants as well, and Pumelo, who of course has facilitated the event. I also don't want to forget the people that worked behind the scenes to make this event possible as well. With regards to the way forward, we look forward to hearing from everybody with regards to initiatives that they would like us to take on board with our next event. As Pumela suggested in the beginning of the meeting, this is number one in a series of events that we'll be collaborating with Africa Bio on. And we would really like to hear from you in terms of how you would like us to facilitate future fireside chats. I think we wanted to just make sure that you are aware, we wanted to have it more of a chat session instead of a presentation session, and perhaps that could be a learning from us going forward. It might have come across too much of a presentation. I would also like to wish you all well and make sure that you all keep safe during these times, and I look forward to seeing you at our next meeting.
So thank you everybody for joining this fire chat conversation. I really think it was very fruitful. It will be one of many to come heading up to BioAfrica Convention. I also want to encourage anybody who has extra questions on the side, media, for instance, to just drop us a note, and those will be handled offline. But to everybody who's made the time to be with us, to our panelists, to our partners, thank you very much, and it's a goodbye from us.